a position to try to help control my opponent, or at least minimize the damage in this position. Again, Colby's in a much more favorable position, would be to grab my opponent's head. He's got my hand and pretty much isolated my arm if he's got the position well. Typically, I might not be able to grab too much, but I can grab his body here, but I can grab his head in this position here. And I can keep it sandwiched to my own shoulder, jamming it in here, making him feel kind of uncomfortable from this position. Why this is important is you can do a foot sweep from this position. Now, again, quite frankly, Colby's in much better position than I'm at here. And I certainly wouldn't be hanging out here for very long. He's likely to initiate an attack. But I can buy myself a moment or two by freezing him up and keeping his head in tight from this position. Good grip here. From this position. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a foot sweep from this position. We're going to go over more in terms of foot sweeps in a future module. But just to get the basics across at this point, and in reviewing the initial module on setups and basic position, once I've gotten Colby's head secured to my shoulder, I've isolated his head and his shoulder, and what I'm trying to do here is keep his head tight to my shoulder. I'm going to twist my body. If his upper body or his head is tight to my body and I twist my body, his body is also going to twist. So if I control his head to my body, I move my body, his body is going to move by virtue of his head being secured well to my body. From this position here, my rear foot is going to step in close because I can't reach very good. Also, too, Colby's pushing into me this way, and that's the direction of my foot sweep. So I'm going to grab, I'm going to step with my rear foot to this position here. My other foot is going to hit here. I'm not going to try to sweep it this way. I'm just going to come down here. And as hard as he holds on to this arm now, if he's pushing into me, and I've secured his head, and I've blocked this foot going in this direction, he's got no post. He's got no post in that direction. So I grab, I'm going to push in a little bit because he's probably also pushing into me. Get that going a little bit more. I'm going to step. And I'm basically, in that instance, basically trying to just get out of that grip. If I can land on top of him, fantastic. But reality is, if he's got a good 2-on-1 on me, my main goal is to salvage my position, which is very poor at that point relative to my opponent's. You'll also notice another thing when I do this sweep, this foot sweep here. I'm not leaning into him like this. As I grab his head, I want you to notice the angle of my body. When I step and I do this sweep, I want you to notice the angle, and I'm exaggerating here to make the point. The angle of my body is like this. I'm not entirely vertical, and I'm surely not trying to be leaning into him as I sweep. And I'm not just going to be upright, because I'm trying to pull him up onto my body, keeping his weight high by virtue of pulling his head up. And you'll notice the angle of my body when I do that is going to be in this direction here. In other words, the center of my gravity is behind my heel here. Because this is a dynamic movement type of situation, he's going to go down, I'm going to be able to recover. But it is crucial that you approach that with this type of an angle when I do that sweep. And I'm not going to be sweeping it like this, I'm just blocking it, and because he's pushing into me and I'm rotating, his body is going to go over where I blocked his foot. And he's got no post, remember, because he's got both of his arms around my arms. And if I rotate my shoulder more and he's holding onto it hard, that's just going to take him all the more in that direction. Colby has a 2-on-1. I block here. Push in, get something back. Push in, get something back. Push in a little bit, get something back. And notice too, I'm rotating my body. Push in, get something back. Push in, get something back. Sometimes my opponent will have a fairly good position here. He's got his head in. I can't just pull this way. If he's got a good grip and he's sagging, he's got good hand control on me here. This is difficult. Sometimes, though, you can hit the wrist to this position here. So this is coming down. This is where most of the action is. And if you can kind of pull it in, you get a little bit of a double action there. Now, as I come through here, this is only the first part. As I chop down, and I'm just sliding down, but I'm going to hit him right towards the wrist and the fleshy part below the thumb here. From this position here, immediately to an underhook. So Colby has the grip here. What I'm trying to, I've got to do this fairly quickly, of course, because Colby has some significant options here to attack me. So I'm going to come down. I'm going to pull this in as this chops down. I'm kind of shrugging my shoulder, and I want you to notice at the same time this pops out here and this chops off, this is going to be coming, windmilling up to an underhook. So from here, and all I want to do from there, now that I got a little bit of space, is just come in to an underhook position here. Colby has good position here. I'm going to slide down. At the same time, I'm going to pull in, and I'm going to windmill out. If your opponent has you in this position, same type of thing. Just want to come down. He has this type of position, same thing. Come here. If my opponent has the 2-on-1, I get head inside, he's in good position here. A moment ago, I showed a sweep, foot sweep here, where I grab the head tight to control him. This is sort of an overall position to at least gather my thoughts for a moment to be able to determine some type of a defensive plan here. And what's nice about this is I'm controlling something substantial of his body. But even if I don't have his head here, I can do a similar type of sweep, particularly if he's pushing in, and particularly if he's got this tight. The tighter he has, in other words, the better the grip is on this, the better this type of technique works. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to have the same similar type of set work and move that I did a moment ago when I swept him, foot swept him. From here, Colby's pushing in, he's got a good grip here. Notice I'm going to shuck my shoulder, and the harder I twist here, and he's holding on to it, he's going to tend to come out and away from my body. I'm going to block his foot. Again, remember the angle of my body has to be backward. I'm not reaching forward. Remember too, as I step in, I've got to cut the distance, so I step in with my rear foot so that I have an easier reach, as opposed to keeping my rear foot back, and then sometimes I have a difficult reach. It's too much distance. So I step in from here. And typically, I can pop his shoulder if I want to, just to rotate his body and basically shuck him off my shoulder. Because if he's holding on tight and he's coming this way, a lot of times he'll need to regain his balance. He'll typically do that by loosening up, at least to some degree, on the 2-on-1. And really, that's all I'm looking for in that situation. I'm probably not going to have to be able to get on top of him necessarily, or even to get another grip on him, but typically just to get him off of me. So Colby's pushing in here. From here, he's pushing in. He's got this really tight. He's got this really tight here. And all I want to do is twist. Kind of hold on tight. Colby's got it tight. He's pushing it. Colby holds on tight here. I'm kind of pushing again. I'm keeping kind of some awareness of an attack here. He's pushing in. I feel that. He's got good position. And I come through. The harder he holds on, as you can imagine here or see, the more tendency he's going to have to go down. Most people just bail out. I'm going to do that now this time. Colby pushes in. Most wrestlers that are experienced know at that point it's best just to bail out. and not necessarily go to the ground, but start afresh. One thing to be very aware of and very wary of is if Colby has a good grip on me here, I don't want to simply get nervous and anxious and be trying to push him away simply to keep him at bay. Because if I do this up here, if I'm trying to block his head, he's going to attack double or single. And so it's crucial that I'm not just simply kind of pushing, because if he's got this arm controlled and this arm is way up high and distracted by trying to keep him away or keep him at bay, all of a sudden I have very little to defend and attack, especially if he blocks this arm off with this arm, whether it's single or double. So beware, if I'm up in here, I'm going to be working this way. I'm not going to be staying up high. I'm grabbing here. I'm not going to be pushing away up here and making myself very vulnerable. If I'm fighting here, or if I've got this type of a grip, or if I'm attacking the hand here, or attacking here, it's much more difficult for him to be able to initiate an attack on me, simply by virtue of this hand being down and ready to defend, as well as having at least some modicum of control against one of his limbs, whereas before I've really got little control here at all.